My name's David Seitz, and I'm the Solutions Architect with IAPP. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about designing with privacy in mind, something that's dear to my heart. So let's get started and have some fun. First, we're going to start out by talking about privacy by design, giving you an overview and a background a little bit about privacy. We're then going to touch on something called data usage agreements. We'll add on to that a little bit of data tracker chain, a little bit of data privacy inspector, and then we'll finish up with some forward thinking about privacy by design. So let's get started. We'll start out with an overview. I like to always start at presentations with a little bit of a survey from audience, and I've done this presentation in other groups, and I always collect a little bit of information of what the audience is thinking. So if you'd like to take part, you can actually see right there the URL and the code if you want to take part in the survey. The first thing I always ask is, how important is data privacy to you? Actually, it's very important to many people. It's not 100%, but it means something to them. And then I always ask, well, if it's so important, how well do companies, online companies, actually manage your privacy? For example, are you able to manage what data you wish to share? Can you actually say how that information is going to be used? And can you actually ask for it to be deleted and removed? And when I ask that, I always say, how easy is it to do and how frequently do you see these options? Come to find out, there's not many online companies that do this. They make it really difficult. I always then follow up with one more question. Because remember, this is tech audience that I'm talking to, and I always ask them, what percentage of your business requirements are actually related to privacy? Come to find out, not many. Less than 25% usually. That's not a lot of focus on privacy. And there's a reason for that. A lot of people get confused the difference between security and privacy. I hear things like our customers' data is secure, so we're okay. Don't worry about it. We have a privacy notice up on our website. Hey, we never take anything outside the US, so we're GDPR compliant. Our security architecture covers all that. I've heard them all. The truth is, though, security has things like encryption, it has access controls, it has audit logs, it has multi-factor authentications. Basically, you're building a fortress, and you want to make sure that your home is safe, that you feel safe there, and that's great. But there's a difference between privacy and security. You see, privacy isn't like security. Yes, you're secure, no one's getting in, but are you really private? I always ask you, can you enforce how the data is being used? Are you fully transparent with the data that you do have and how you're using it with your customers? And do you track where that data is located in your system? Are you only collecting the data you need when you need it? And are the data owners still in full control of their data? These are the questions you should ask. If you answer no to any of them, you're not really focused on privacy. Because the truth is, security and privacy are not the same. Yes, you need security to be private, but you don't need privacy to be secure. I always like to focus on the strategies of privacy by design. And there are 8 of them. And if there's anything you can learn from this presentation, it's this slide. The strategies are very simple, but make so much sense. Minimize. Don't collect the data until you need it, and only the data you need. Separate. Don't keep it all together. My name, address, phone number, birth date, they shouldn't be all kept in the same place. In fact, I should have to make separate calls and requests, so I can control who's allowed to see an address and who's allowed to see a birthday. Make sure it's abstract. You don't want too much detail in there if you don't need it. Make sure you're hiding things. This is where encryption comes into play, obfuscation, masking. Make sure you're also informing. The data owners have a right to know what you're doing. You have to control it, how you're using that data. You have to enforce it, and you got to demonstrate it to the data owners. Show them you are doing what you promised. So on those strategies, I wrote some open source SDK for privacy by design. What I focused on were some features that I thought of. A data usage agreement. I thought of a data tracker chain, even a data privacy inspector. I wrote this all in Rust and it's in Crates.io if you want to download the open source and use the SDK. But let's not focus on the language and the code base. Let's focus more on concepts right now. So let's start first with the data usage agreements. So once again, I asked my audiences, so how confident are you in the systems that enforce, control, and demonstrate the adherence to how that data was going to be used? And come to find out, remember, these are tech people in the audience, they're not confident. They're not confident that they actually can do that. And that always makes me think, if I go to a store to purchase something, they're always asking for my zip code. Why? And if you don't give it, can you not purchase the item? That's actually causes food for thought when it comes to why are you collecting the data and can you demonstrate for me how you're going to use it? So I started me thinking about contracts and agreements. And if you're a full stack engineer or an architect or a test engineer, you know about things like user requirements, acceptance criteria, security standards and audits, open API, contract-driven development. All of these things are all about creating agreements and then testing for them. But there's one agreement we just don't look at, and that is data usage. Where's the contract? How do we test it? Oh, wait a minute, we have a contract. It's right here on the web. Why don't you go look at it and read it? Yeah, there's a problem with that. How do you enforce this? How do you control this? And how do you demonstrate that you're really doing what that agreement says on the web page? It's just ink on a paper. So data usage agreements helps us address these issues. And when it comes to the strategies, it focuses on forming, controlling, enforcing, and demonstrating. A data usage agreement has a few parts. One is the name. What's the name of this agreement? Notice that right there helps me specify this could be used for billing, for shipping, for marketing, maybe for customer support. I know what you're going to use the data for. It also gives a location where I can look up that contract or agreement if we want to actually communicate to the data owners what's entailed. And then there's a date and time when the owner actually agreed to use this contract for this data. So if we look at it, all of these usage agreements can be attached to the data as a package. Think of it like an envelope. I don't have to look inside to read the letter because on the outside are my usage agreements. I know I can use it for billing and for shipping. I can't use it for customer support or marketing. That's really nice as far as abstraction and separation. The other nice part with the data usage agreement is we can actually use it to enforce and control. If a payload comes in to a RESTful API or microservice and it doesn't have the right usage agreement, I can deny it. I can't use this data the way you want to. Let's look at another one as the data tracker chain. I like to ask this question also, where is your data located in your huge system when you're processing data? And people put out all sorts of words because, well, let's face it, your data is all over the place. It's touched everywhere. And then I always say, okay, if it's going everywhere, how many of you are actually creating data flow maps? Not many. How about the ability to retrieve all the locations where your customer data have been landed or been read? Well, not too many either. Okay, can you demonstrate that all the data belonging to that customer has been deleted upon request? Well, there's more confidence there. How? You don't know where the data is going. You're not confident where it's been, but you're confident that you deleted it all? That doesn't make sense. So I always think of it like this. It takes no time for a company to gather your data when you want to buy something. But if you ask them to remove your data, it takes weeks because it's a heavy lift. Why is that? Well, you got a whole bunch of data domains. Billing, fulfillment, sales, customer support. It's coming in many different ways. And trying to find that data in that complex system, it's like trying to find where's Waldo. It's not easy. And it makes sense because you've got backups, you've got logs, you've got test data caching, temporary locations, monitoring, reporting. Who knows where it's been? That's where the data tracker chain comes into play. Now look at the strategies again. The data tracker chain helps us inform, control, demonstrate as well. And that's important. The data tracker chain basically follows that whole sort of chain methodology of building these markers, where it's been, making sure we know when, where, and what it's touched. And if we attach those to the data package, once again, like an envelope, when something comes in and I see that it came from the billing address verification, I can either say that's good or it shouldn't have been there. Or maybe I'm having a problem with the data, we got to roll back and I know where it's been upstream, so I'm going to go notify those systems. And that's the nice thing about the data tracker chain. Each data piece knows where it's been. And I don't have to go looking it up because it's with the data. It makes it really easy when I'm processing data because I can actually use it as a gate of middleware. And I can say, guess what? Your tracker chain isn't there, or it's where it shouldn't have been. I'm not going to touch this data because it came from a third party where it shouldn't have. That's kind of suspicious, so I'm going to block it. Or no, it's all good, let it through. Let's look at one more, the Data Privacy Inspector. That's a really interesting one. When we talk about inspecting our data, we usually think of regex. Going to have some patterns, going to go look at the data, see if there's any private data in our system, maybe a database or a flat file location. Traditionally, we batch things up, we schedule the job, we run some rigorous logic like regex, and it's unidirectional. We find something, mask it, obfuscate it, or delete it. The truth is, though, we have to change our approach. We can't do that anymore, not in this day and age. We have to look at the data individually, in real time as it happens. And as we're inspecting the data to see if it's private, that inspection logic has to learn and adapt. And it's got to be bidirectional, not unidirectional. This is where the Data Privacy Inspector comes into play. When it comes to the strategies, it supports control as well as enforce. Let's look at the building blocks of a Data Privacy Inspector. In order to inspect data to see if there's private data, we have to look for some keywords. Maybe there's some regex we put in there. Maybe there's some patterns that we want to follow. When we have those in place, we can initiate our privacy inspector. We can use the default settings in my SDK. You could maybe choose a category such as health information or personal addresses. Or you can even write your own custom logic of regex, keywords, patterns, and say, this is what I want you to use when you instantiate yourself as a privacy inspector. You can then even take it and train that inspector. Give us some sample data. It'll come up with other suggestions, and you can either include them or ignore them. And when it's ready to go, you can start using it to inspect your data, and it'll provide a score. That score tells you how much risk there is of private data being in that content. If I'm a process that shouldn't be handling any PII, well, let's say a support comes in and it's processing emails that are being sent in to have them aligned to what queue it should be sent to. If there's too much private data, we could deny it. If there's not much private data, we could accept it. In this way, we're making sure we're minimizing how much we actually take on for risk. Let's also look at some forward thinking. This is where the fun begins. If we take those strategies again, minimize, separate, abstract, hide, inform, control, enforce, and demonstrate, and we take that SDK and marry it up with DAS, Data as a Service, and architectural pattern, and that pattern uses a data model, processing, and eventing. We put them together and we have a very powerful privacy by design. Let's look at DAS. DAS is an infrastructural pattern, but also something else, and I'll get to that in a second. The pattern it's following is event brokering, nothing new. We do use a few things though. In order to force minimization, we're only sending data to the topics that we need. That means a microservice that's going to send it downstream only sends the data it thinks it should actually be sent onto that topic for what that processor should do. It also separates it. The address might be different than the actual order information, so that the microservice that's processing the order never has any PII information in it. We also control it, and that's being done by encryption. Encryption isn't just for in-flight or when it's landed. It's also when it's being processed, because those keys can tell you who's allowed and who's not allowed to look at the data and process it. Just another layer of control. But there's another big part of Daas Pattern, and that is the data model. That's right, a data model defines the pattern as well. It's not just a broker and eventing that make it so cool. This data model actually comes with the concept of metadata wrapped up around a data object. The data that I'm actually managing and sending has metadata around it. I never have to look inside the data to get an idea of what the data is about and what I should do with it and how. That is powerful. Because what it allows you to do is abstract the data, allows you to separate it out. It minimizes how much you really need to know and when you need to know it. So if we look at privacy by design, we looked at an overview. What is all privacy versus security? We also looked at how to use data usage agreements. We followed that up with data tracker chain, as well as a data privacy inspector. And then we talked about the Daas pattern and how we could move forward and actually marry it up. I want to thank you so much for taking your time with me, sharing a little bit about privacy by design and getting that mindset. If you're interested in learning more, come to the IAPP. We've got so much information to share with you because believe me, it's going to be worth it in the long run. Have a great day. We hope you enjoyed it.